The Trump administration is making plans to start prosecuting people for their beliefs and their positions on things, not their actions, but their beliefs. Today, we're looking at the NSPM 7, which is a new directive that Trump issued that stands for the National Security Presidential Memorandum 7. This happened recently. It happened kind of quietly, and they didn't really publicize it. And I think mainstream media didn't really pick it up. They thought of this as a executive order. And we're going to talk about it today, and we're going to talk about the risks it poses and how this is actually a very scary thing that may violate many laws and is very unconventional. I'm Shant Karnikian. That's Brian Kabateck. This is Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. If you like this content, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share this with whoever you think might be interested, especially this episode is a very interesting and frightening thing that I think needs to be covered. So Brian, where do we start with this at the NSP?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, look, they've been nibbling around the corners of this since the Kirk assassination. And of course, trying to maximize the value of the Kirk assassination for their own agenda. And what they've been nibbling around the corners on has constantly been, we're going to go after liberal leaning groups. We're going to go, and they're trying to tie anybody who disagrees with the position of the administration to some kind of criminal activity. They're trying to strip their tax-free status. But you're absolutely right, Shant. This is something that flew below the radar that most people don't know about. And I think that's why it's important that people do share these videos, these podcasts we do, so that other people know exactly what's going on, because I guarantee you the average person on the street doesn't know. So let's do a dive into what NSPM is actually trying to accomplish here and what it says. So it's trying to draw an indicia of violence to certain statements. Okay, so first of all, we're talking about speech and content of speech, right?
Yeah. And by the way, let's talk about how it kind of works, because this is easy to confuse with an executive order. Executive order, yes, it's powerful, but it lays out publicly, always publicly, the course of day-to-day government operations, whereas a national security directive is a sweeping policy decree for, how intelligence and law enforcement and defense should operate in this country. Oftentimes they're secret. They're issued in secret. For example, in 1980, Jimmy Carter signed one about nuclear proliferation or nuclear arsenal. This happens in secret, but then they get declassified. George W. Bush signed some after 9/11. One of them, including the NSA's intercepts, which were ultimately declared unlawful. And these weren't revealed at the time. They often comes out later when they're declassified. So this is Trump's 7th one since he's been in office.
But this was just classified. This was never classified.
It was publicized. Yeah, well, it was publicly released, but it wasn't publicized much. And it's entitled "Countering Domestic Terrorism and Organized Political Violence." And he basically directs the Justice Department, the FBI, other law enforcement apparatus within the federal government to basically fight what he calls political violence. But if you really start looking at it, what they're using as indicia of having political violence or being, organizations that should be investigated, it's kind of scary stuff.
Yeah. Let's go through them.
Sure.
Let's go through what some of this indicia is of political violence or of, anything that they consider to be contrary that they should investigate. Anti-Christian, anti-capitalism, anti-Americanism. I mean, what is that?
Yeah.
Extremism on migration, extremism on race, extremism on gender. I mean, it is sort of like the MAGA manifesto, right? It's hostility towards those who hold traditional American values on family, on religion, on morality.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's the thought police.
Yeah. It's the thought police. It's the Minority Report. Have you ever seen that movie, getting arrested before you could commit a crime because you thought about committing the crime? I mean, this is, and these aren't, first of all, none of these things are crimes. Political violence is a crime. That's for sure. But what it's trying to do is directing strategy to disrupt these individuals or groups too, by the way.
Right.
It's not,
I think it's trying to draw a bridge. It's trying to draw a bridge between political violence and groups and organizations that the administration views as contrary to them. And, I want to take a word on Antifa, because that's become a MAGA buzzword. it's a loose organization. There's no leadership. There's no Antifa growth. It basically means anti-fascism. And they've demonized it. And I don't know whether there are people in Antifa that, would advocate the violent overthrow of the United States. That's fine if they are.
I don't even think it's an official organization. I think it's not.
That's the point. It's not. But if you talk to a MAGA person, they think Antifa is this, network that's spread across the country. Like, I don't know, like the Proud Boys.
Yeah. I mean, it's because they need a boogeyman in every one of these circumstances. They need a boogeyman. This is typical playbook for the MAGA verse for the Trump administration. And this is their new boogeyman. And what's, I think, very frightening about this is that they're sort of weaponizing, or they're giving the green light for these law enforcement arms within the federal government, the DOJ, the FBI, the IRS, to sort of investigate, I think the words they use are investigate and disrupt these groups purely based on their beliefs. I mean, that's the scary part of this. So,
and I think it's so serious, Shant, that we know that some major law firms, that are out there advising their clients, they're advising their clients, quote, the stakes are high. This is a firm called Arnold and Porter, which is one of the largest law firms in the world. And it says the presidential memorandum makes clear that the Department of Justice intends to target tax-exempt organizations and their funders for investigation of potential criminal prosecution, including based on activities that have been historically viewed as protected by the First Amendment. So that basically sums it up. But what these law firms are saying is you need to be careful.
Yeah.
Because the government of the United States is going to come after you. And right now, I have word that there's 100 organizations out there, left-leaning organizations, who have banded together and vowed in a letter to push back on this attack in the philanthropic center. Gee, I'm struggling with that word, right? I sound like Trump. Philanthropic center. And these are, intended to undermine these organizations. So it literally, Shant, would be the death knell of some smaller organizations if all of a sudden they get audited or their tax status gets removed. Because
of the position they have, not because of something they've actually done, not because, I don't know, they orchestrated some, protest that got violent, or even not got violent, whatever. No, before it even gets there, this whole idea, this NSPM is giving these law enforcement agencies the directive to go after folks and organizations for their thinking, for their beliefs, for what they stand for, which, and that line you read about things that are historically protected by the First Amendment, that's kind of terrifying that a major law firm has to advise its clients that, while these things have been historically protected by major law, by the First Amendment, now they might not be. I think this directive is a huge violation of the First Amendment. I think it's a major problem. And
I mean, for example, let's just use a hypothetical here, which is typical in law schools, which is, Sean, I want you to assume that the ACLU, which, we know represents people who are trying to exercise free speech rights, for example, suddenly is deemed as being un-American.
Yeah.
Right. And they go after the ACLU. They want to get rid of the ACLU. They go after groups that aren't, directly tied to the Judeo kind of Christian values of supposedly the Trump administration, although I have personal doubts whether or not Trump has any of those personal values. But I think that's what they're going to do. And I think that's exactly what they're trying to do here, is go after these various organizations.
Yeah. Well, one of the law firms, one of these big law firms warned their clients that, even individuals could face criminal exposure under this type.
And that's a good question, Sean. What is the problem that the Republicans have with George Soros?
I don't know. They're obsessed with another boogeyman, though. It's just another boogeyman.
I mean, there's a counterpart on the Republicans, Adelson. Miriam Adelson is the surviving spouse of
Sheldon,
Sheldon Adelson, right? Very wealthy, gave a lot of money, still gives a lot of money to Republican causes. So George Soros does the same on the left. But man, you talk to a MAGA person and they just view him as the devil incarnate. And obviously the Trump administration does too. And obviously he's a very wealthy person who's giving a lot of money to these causes.
Yeah. I mean, it's terrifying stuff. And we need to be aware of this. Stuff like this kind of I don't know why this one specifically wasn't on everyone's radar, but I think it's a big deal. And I think it'll be challenged. A lot of this is going to be challenged in the courts, and I hope it shakes out the right way. But, this is I think a kind of a new, bigger step that the administration has taken in weaponizing or the law enforcement agencies to go after people for their thinking. That's the truly terrifying part of it. So, new thought police are coming, the Trump thought police. And, I wonder how the right feels about this, about, people that are for small government. I wonder how they feel about thought police being out there and monitoring how people think and potentially.
Well, I think once again, that, and this is my last thought on this. I think once again, they fly some of the stuff below the radar, or they dress it up, they put lipstick on the pig, and they try to make it sound like they're trying to protect America when in fact they're just trying to advance their own agenda. They're trying to shut down people who disagree with them.
Yeah.
So look, this is why I said at the beginning, my last comment on this is why it's important that people share this information and let people know what's going on.
Yeah, just being aware of this, even if it's someone on the other side of the political spectrum. I still think that there's some common ground that can be found. I think everyone on both sides should be outraged by this type of conduct, because if it was a Democrat doing this and doing stuff like this and creating thought police, I think Republicans would be very upset, and rightfully so. So I think it's very important that we find common ground across the political spectrum on why this is wrong. So, with that, I think we should wrap this up. I'm Shant Karnikian. That's Brian Kabateck. We're two lawyers at a firm called Kabateck LLP. This is Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. If you like this content, like we said, share it, like it, subscribe, but also, get it out there, get this message out there so we can find some common ground with everyone, every American. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.